Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Rachida Parks, and today I have the honor and the privilege of being joined by Mustafa Alghali to the HDC Chat Series. This is a podcast, or this is a mission-driven podcast that brings together global thought leaders to explore groundbreaking insights at the intersection of healthcare and digital innovation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Mustafa El Ghali, and thank you for connecting all the way from Canada.
Thank you, Dr. Rashida. Like this is actually the privilege is mine. It's been always admiring all of the work you're doing, and congratulations on launching this series. I just went through some of the opposites, and it looks like very rich in the context and the people there. It's kind of entertaining to go through it. And thank you
Thank you.
for having me as a guest.
Thank you. That's really the idea. This is a platform where we share informally all the wonderful breakthroughs within healthcare and AI, especially. So I always start with a light note, and this is about how we met. We met back in 2024 in Dubai, and that was during the Zimam Digital Health Forum. And for those not familiar, I'm going to do a shout out to the forum, which is an international gathering where thought leaders in AI and healthcare come together for an in-depth dialogue, meaningful knowledge exchange. And both you and I, we were honored that year, and I'm sure you came many years before that and after. We were honored to be among the invited guest speakers to contribute to many sessions. And while the dialogue was really awesome and the exchanges and the networking, including meeting you, I think meeting and traveling to an exciting and vibrant city such as Dubai was really awesome for me because that was my first
It
time in
is.
Dubai.
It's
So,
it's it was a nice chance to meet you there, although like we are in the same time zone, I think here, but
yes.
it's good opportunity that Zimam collected all of these in one place, and that was kind of great opportunity to meet you and the others there in Zimam.
Yeah,
Shout out to them.
absolutely. Yeah, shout out to the leader. And he was actually also a guest speaker of this podcast. So I'm going to shift to with this intro to introducing your background, your amazing background, and more complete bio is available. I saw that under your company website, which is amplify.com. Uh, so I'm going to start with this short bio. Mustafa El Ghali, he's a co-founder and CTO, Chief Technology Officer of Amplify Health. He is an AI scientist and healthcare and health tech entrepreneur. He previously built large-scale AI solutions at Unity Technologies. Mustafa now leads Amplify's mission to make preventative healthcare accessible through the intersection of AI, thermal imaging, and clinical practice. His work focuses on transforming early detection for chronic conditions like diabetes and sports medicine while navigating global regulatory landscapes to bring proactive tools to patients worldwide. Thanks again for joining us. And I know this short bio is not doing justice, but everybody stay tuned for the wonderful conversation ahead.
Thank you, Rashida, for the intro, and hopefully we'll be able to add to the conversation and beyond expectation.
Wonderful. I have few notes. Again, this is not a scripted conversation, but I have few notes here to help me guide the conversation. I am going to start with you sharing with us your journey into AI and healthcare. You shared a bit of it during the health forum in Dubai, but this is for everybody to understand this rich journey and what led you from working on large scale AI systems to co-founding Amplify Health.
I see. So there are two things that I would say on the journey to highlight how it started and why it continued. So before, as you mentioned, I was working on large scale AI systems, and it's actually very challenging and very entertaining problem to have. You're always working with very impactful systems, um, cutting edge technologies. You're always optimizing to something, trying to make things work on a scale and not to break them because it's also costly. So it's always was a big impact problems, which is the challenge of it. It gives sense of fulfillment that you're actually directly making an impact. But what I was so before I jump into how the transition happened, or actually the transition itself was started with an idea. I never imagined myself to be in the health tech. So my partner, uh, co-founder at Amplify, Mishari, he came up with an idea of like how can we improve the screening, and we were brainstorming on like what to make. We brainstormed multiple ideas until like we were able to converge to what Amplify provides to the solution right now. But that time we never imagined like the magnitude of the problem, how much this can scale in terms of the solution itself, as the vertical, the brainstorming and the building and all of the iterations came after. So I would say like I didn't pick to be in health tech, it picked me. And how it continued is the most important. So when I started the idea, um, it was just a side project working on it, and the kind of impact was different from like building the largest scale. That's I'm enjoying the journey, but the impact in health tech, it was feeling that you're adding value to not gonna talk about like how you're changing patients' life, how this is very fulfilling, but it is so behind in terms of like these technological innovations that can actually be brought from advanced domains into healthcare, which is lacking lots of these innovations. Um, it's for a reason. We're going to talk about that, I think, in the future. But that's one of the things that, oh, actually, I see that I can make a bigger impact here because I know that lots of things can be brought from my experience in the other fields into the healthcare. Yes.
This is amazing. Thank you for sharing this journey. And everybody is affected by healthcare. So any subtle, any small advances impact all of us all across the globe. And it's interesting, you said you did not pick healthcare, it picked you. That is so beautiful because as I was attending your sessions and reading some of your accomplishments. You, even though your background is in AI, you didn't focus in AI, but you picked a problem and you leverage your background in AI to solve it. And that's one of the reasons I want experts like yourself that are adding value to the technical aspect of AI. So now I'm going to switch to your expertise in thermal imaging, which I had to research a lot to see. I'm familiar with computer vision, but this is a little bit branched in. And I will ask another question about computer vision, but go into thermal imaging, which captures subtle physiological heat patterns, and please correct me, that may indicate early changes in the human body. And on the other side, we have AI that enables these patterns to be analyzed at scale and over time. How this combination of AI and thermal imaging fundamentally transforms preventative care that you were talking about. Uh, and I think I'll stop here.
Right. So, like, what you can, if we zoom out, our body in general, it's a thermal map by itself, and we can it that map or that signature changes with lots of underlying factors, and it sends signal, same as like the other signals that we're trying to measure for the body. but that signal hasn't been leveraged the best throughout the thermography history. Thermography existed for decades, for um, like I think the since the beginning of the 1960s, and continued to be used in human medical thermography. Uh, but it has been always focused and been dominated kind of by the dominated by the thermographers, human thermographers only, because it needed that expertise to be able to interpret the qualitative and the quantitative signal that comes from these thermograms. It's kind of um, makes its scalability and accessibility only limited to the existence of these human thermographers. There is a growing community, growing outreach, and growing research that has been expanding through the years. But how can we bring the value of thermography into each clinic or a medical center to be able to leverage that signal in screening, in the early detection, and so on, is through what you mentioned of leveraging technology like AI, which basically digitize the human thermographer knowledge and be able to make or I would say democratize the knowledge of the thermography to be able to be accessible for individuals who don't understand thermography but understand the potential that actually their signals can be interpreted with the help of AI to be able to capture them and leverage them into their existing workflows. So this is, I would say, these two combos, being able to understand the thermography and analyze it at scale, will help bringing this from uh, a community of thermographers to be able to bring it more into the clinicians at scale with the help of AI. That's, I think, the main target or objective, to be able to scale such technology. But there are also other factors, which is mainly how AI could help as well, um, make thermography uh, accessible through the screening protocol. Thermography in general, beside the interpretation, you're going to need to understand how to do the sample acquisition protocol in a controlled environment. So the AI itself could help with this. It has been always challenged to control the external factors that could influence the signal that the thermography would deliver. But with the help of AI, it could help with the guidance of clinicians on how to improve the sample collection protocols and validation in real time and standardizing the thermogram quality, which makes it then useful to quantitative and qualitative analysis down the way. So all of that, it's possible to be done at scale thanks to the AI that can be leveraged through all of the journey from the sample acquisition to the standardization and to the analysis and the result or risk stratification at the end.
Thank you for providing such valuable um, background of thermography or thermal imaging. I'll definitely use this part when teaching my AI in healthcare class, which I do once or twice a year. Um, with my background in information system and AI, when we get to this a module, when we talk about the human body and clinical aspects and leveraging AI, the first thing that I start with is computer vision, right? And how it typically analyzes visible light images to recognize structural or visual signals of diseases, right? Um, However, this is once changes have already happened or they're apparent or they're visible. Given that context and based on what you just said, how can AI enable thermal imaging shift healthcare towards earlier more preventative interventions compared to the conventional computer vision approaches um, that have existed. So if you can talk about this subtlety, uh, preventative versus, I don't want to call it reactive. I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm waiting on your feedback on this.
Yeah, like these are two modalities that are, let's say, like have been working with them extensively. Talking about computer vision, which is in itself computer vision on visible images, or like I would say in general, help a lot in with the progress and in the improvement that we have seen on the computer vision world, in the state of art models, and borrowing many of these concepts into the other modalities. Um, this includes even the other modalities we're talking about in medical imaging in general. So that's one of these aspects. But as you mentioned, the difference in the context when we're speaking about, let's say, diabetic foot, um, it's one of these very medically challenging conditions that if it actually appears, then the healing journey, it is much more complicated in terms of like the processes that we have to go through compared to taking care of the foot before the complications begin. And this is the case of most of the medical conditions, but I would say diabetic foot is among these that it actually makes a big difference in the prevention case versus the reactive approach. Um, in that context, if the wound start appearing, it's already in like a treatment phase. And we're talking about like visible images. If we are relying only on the visual inspection, that means that we are already seeing structural changes that are indicative of the ulceration process or acute inflammation or any condition that is actually would require intervention. And because we're talking about challenges on the healing process of diabetic foot due to neuropathic conditions or peripheral artery disease or any microvascular conditions that could affect the healing process of the wounds themselves, it makes it much more challenging. So coming back to your question, with that visual inspection limitation, thermography comes to complement to be seeing the like the physiological changes that happens underlying the skin before the ulcer breaks out into the outer skin. So this is the case of like if you have microvascular changes that change the blood perfusion or any mechanical trauma in the feet themselves, it would change the signature of the blood flow, or you have inflammation, infection, and many conditions that are actually would imply a risk that is going to put this region of the foot at a risk because of these pathological changes into ulceration process down the way. So that's why, um, as you mentioned, thermography could help us capture these signals because we're looking at it at an earlier stage. We are capturing signal that is not captured usually by the naked eye. And we have seen lots of samples, have seen it myself. You look at the feet, it's perfectly normal, but you look at it in the thermal spectrum, it is completely different. And that's the beauty of the thermal imaging. You're getting a very strong signal for a feed that could be completely normal, and then a few weeks later, it's at risk of amputation, unfortunately.
Never thought about it this way. We all know either friends or family members that are diagnosed with diabetes. And I'm thinking, could that have been prevented or known before? I did not think about this question. So before this discussion, how does a person know or go to a doctor and ask for a thermal imaging? How is that happening in practice?
That's a very good question. So, in general, it's recommended for each diabetic patient to do a foot exam at least annually, even if they are not at a risk. That is combined with lots of recommendations to take care of your feet, make sure that you hydrate them. You also inspect them from time to time because the risk of many of the risk that comes from the diabetic patients would develop most like a big or significant number of them, they would develop the loss of protective sensation symptoms over time, which is, as the name indicate, loss of protective sensation. Nothing protects that wound from developing over time, and they don't, it's the only part of your body that actually you don't see except like if you look at your food through a mirror or you try to
Yeah.
inspect it by yourself. So that's why lots of the cases, the patients themselves didn't know that the ulcer actually started to develop. And they'd be surprised, oh, actually, where did this wound come from? So they have to do that annual check, especially at the ones at higher risk. So the International Working Group of Diabetic Food, they have this standardized risk stratification that gets always um, updated due to the ongoing publications, literature, and it's up to date with the latest findings. And according to that, like you have every risk category, they have their own screening frequency. And thermal imaging will be complementary in that case, like to be able to come to the clinic, to be able to do screening. The beauty of it, the thermal imaging would provide you with a way to do screening in that frequency that is recommended because other modalities or other medical imaging ways are invasive and you cannot do them at a higher frequency. Thermal imaging is non-invasive. It helps you with monitoring the condition over time. Look at it without having to worry about how much actually tests that they can conduct on the patient because you don't know when the ulcer could develop. It could be from an injury from a fall or a mechanical trauma or a tight shoe compressing against the toes. So you don't know when it's going to happen because you're at risk by just being diabetic, unfortunately. But the good thing with monitoring, inspection, that is can be prevented. So thermal imaging as a non-invasive modality, it's helping with satisfying these international guidelines of frequent inspections of the feet.
Follow-up question from AI development to research. We're both involved in we start by a sample collection to control environment and some the quality of the thermograms and standards apply the analysis. There's so many pieces that goes into it, into the entire process. This is not a trivial process. However, we all know that there is sometimes noise. How does AI help us distinguish clinically relevant thermal patterns from noise?
That's a very good question because if you're talking about thermal patterns, we're not talking about like just structural patterns that we are detecting. You need to take into account understanding the context as it's many other problems. You need to look into the anatomically aware patterns, for example. Does this um, change in the thermal pattern, does it make sense biologically? Is it when it comes to noise, for example, you would have quickly appearing changes and quickly disappearing ones. You need to do longitudinal analysis as well over time to see if the patterns actually persist to validate noise from like just biologically validated patterns, anatomically aware as well analysis of the feet, because the toes, for example, in the extremities, they could have poor blood perfusion that could be ischemic conditions, or you could have a neuropathic conditions that change the entire blood perfusion in the entire feet area. So there is specific high signals, I would say, beyond just a thermal pattern that needs to take into account. I would say one question would make, does this pattern make sense biologically? And to answer that, you need to understand the anatomy, the conditions that you're trying to actually detect in the feet, and how they are associated with the ulceration process or the risk that you're trying to stratify. So all of that, it's different factors when you develop the AI, you need to take into account. So you just don't see abnormality and flag it, and this is abnormality. You need to make sure that it does make sense so the clinicians also trust the signal that you're bringing.
Mustafa, the more you answer, the more I'm going to ask questions that I didn't think about. So it's all on you if we go over time.
For
So,
feel free to ask. I'm also kind of enjoying reflecting on these questions because it is one of the core answers that we were trying to figure out building TF scan at Amplify.
awesome. And hopefully this will lead to future collaborations. You said a question that needs to be answered and needs to be reflected on. Do these findings make sense anatomically? I can't pronounce that word correctly. And I'm thinking of two aspects, um, which are related to the clinician now beyond the artifact or beyond the model, the AI model. So where does the clinician's expertise become essential? Um, and is there a concern from the clinicians themselves that their role um, may be diminished? Is there a risk of that being diminished? And I can't help but to tie this to trust. If clinicians is not trusting this AI-based preventative tools, how, especially when patients are not symptomatic, how are they going to embrace it? So I know it's a loaded question between trust, between the role of the clinicians. If you can shed some light as you're dealing with those would say on a project basis or a daily basis.
That's that's a good continuation of the last question because as I mentioned, that's how we're trying to bring the answer of like this is why we think this is the risk category of this scan and so on. But at the same time, who's gonna read that report? It's gonna be the clinician. So making the clinician also aware or at least understanding what are you bringing. And this is take us to the interpretability of the AI itself. First, your analysis, the reason of the risk, and why what are we recommending? So when we bring these patients from screening stage into the clinician, there is a reason that the clinician knows that why this patient came here. So I can trust actually the AI is bringing me the high risk. And I'm going to step back to talk about we're solving a system problem in the first case before actually we're talking about what's the accuracy of this. When talking about the system, diabetic population is growing. The numbers are growing like all around the world, and talking about the GCC is one of the most fastest growing numbers in terms of diabetic population. And unfortunately, the numbers of diabetic foot experts or podiatrists and vascular surgeons is no way at all sufficient to be able to conduct the necessary screening programs for these diabetic populations. And who's going to conduct these tests? No one. They only because they are busy fighting and treating these conditions. They are doing their best, but they unfortunately have only the cases when they come late. If you are able to bring these high risk patients early, you're helping with that clinicians to be able to focus on the treating the cases before it's complicated, reducing amputations. And why I'm answering on the direction of like the system, because the clinician actually needs their knowledge. They are equipped to be able to conduct the scan, but they don't have the time. So we're helping with that. We're helping with removing or offloading that screening part from the clinicians who are super busy to be conducted by any clinician that is like, let's say, nurses or any healthcare provider that can conduct the test to be able to do the risk stratification with the patients and bring them before they develop the ulcer into the clinicians. So that's one. It's helping clinicians in the first stage um, because they are already busy with the treatment. So we're helping with the system-wide issue. Second, talking about the trust, interoperability is very important part. When we are developing our models, it is always about how can we provide the reasoning of the result or the risk stratification and the supporting evidence within the report itself that the clinician will be able to have. And this is very important part, and this is very critical part of the offering that we have in PF Scan. And even with the regulations that we have, it's actually, although it's required, we provide more than what it's required by the regulations because we know that the trust, even if we meet the standards of the regulations, we want to make sure like we gain the highest trust of the clinicians, and that's finally, I would say, the training and making the communications with them very open because they have questions. They are seeing technology that is being introduced in the field. We're seeing cases, we're seeing complications, we're seeing challenges as clinicians. When you bring a solution, we want to know like if it's actually going to address our concerns. So we need to listen to them, and the product was developed with their concerns in the first place. So when they get there, they know that it's actually can fit in the workflow. Because if you, for example, develop it with your own assumptions of like how this is going to fit into the workflow, you're not going to gain their trust, given that you actually developed it in isolation. So it needs to be developed with the clinicians, taking into the concern, and even after the development, make the communication always open with them to answer whatever they have. It's a continuous relationship of trust with the clinicians, would say.
Thank you, Mustafa. This is extremely relevant, and this is so much what's happening in the field beyond, what we see in the news or when you see some papers. We need that working together between the technology side, the AI side, and the clinicians for the supporting patients. On the side, I'm working actually with a team of nephrologists developing some AI tools, and the collaboration itself is so rewarding because you're looking at the model itself, but then it's when it's analyzed and reviewed by the medical team, there's that back and forth. There's a lot of transparency.
Right.
You have no choice but to be transparent and make sure you adhering to all the legal laws, whether it's national or international, because at the end, it's the human being at stake. We use this analogy all the time. I'd rather miss a customer not buying a car or a product rather than, a patient losing, a diabetes losing part of their, a foot or
Right.
something. So you'll take it to the extreme level of rigor just because it involves us. Um,
It is.
the This leads me to the next question, and for us, whether we're sharing knowledge, teaching, or applying AI, there is this question that we always ask, not asked by everybody, with or without AI. And sometimes people they don't like the answer, right? And others they you give them some reflection. Especially in healthcare, there is a real risk of chasing AI simply because it's possible, right? Like
Right.
every other
Right.
industry, are you using AI? Then you're not following the latest thing. But can you share some examples that you dealt with where the most effective solution was not more AI, but simply better design, workflow, or clinical practice?
That's very very true. Like a reality of today, because if we think of it, maybe let's say like working on the AI 10 years ago, you would try to convince an enterprise of why I should introduce AI. These days, you're gonna have the opposite argument why we should not do this with AI,
I
and
concur.
it's not gonna be easy to go that direction if the enterprise is not aware enough of where the AI could add into the potential versus it's going to be an extra burden. But to give you kind of concrete examples, I would say from my own experience, it's the clinical workflow. You really, it's a very, very important part when you're developing your solution, like where it's gonna fit, who's gonna use it, how it's gonna be used, and so on. And that part of the question would define even your entire approach, like how your AI solution would fit there. And part of these answers sometimes it's not about your AI itself. It's you're gonna think about, for example, how busy are the clinicians? Are you going to add a burden to that? I think like that question is very, very repetitive. Like clinicians are overworked, are already busy. You don't want to come up with a tool to make their lives harder, even if you have the best AI model, they just don't have the time. That's a reality. So what you're gonna make to streamline their operations without having to add an extra burden? That's a question for lots of things. First, you're gonna understand the workflow. That means you're going to see if you actually can make changes in your technology from user experience, interfaces, and so on to make your solution integral to their workflow. For example, we have evolved over time to develop solutions like our TF scan solution have evolved over time to be more efficient on how the sample acquisition protocol to make sure it's the fastest, it's the easiest, while clinically the most validated, up to date, and at the same time taking all of the feedback, the questions, and the challenges that could face the clinicians to be able to integrate it. One more thing also, like let's say, beside the user experience and the UI, I found one of the most efficient ways, like I have participated in onboarding healthcare practitioners into the product. And most of those that they operate, for example, TF scan are nurses. And when I talk to them, it's very important to make them understand why this product has been developed in the first place. Lots of companies or healthcare providers, when they conduct these kind of trainings, they would illustrate to the clinicians or the healthcare provider the instructions of use, and that's it. You need to make them understand why it has been developed, which population it targets, what to use it for and what not to use it for, and then the operational instructions comes in the second place to make sure things are right. And that's actually increased the participation itself of the staff because they are engaged. They know the importance of using that tool. They know how to use it properly because they understand where it fits in the workflow. So the training was needed. Instead of like just focusing on your technology, you need to
Yeah.
train the clinicians better. And that's one of many examples where the answer is not AI. It's usually something else you need to think about, and it's could be operations, user experience, many things that you need to take into consideration.
Oh, I think you read my mind. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Um, Being a co-founder and chief technology officer, it's not just let me oversee the technologies being used, and you mentioned from change management to user interfaces or UX and all the different aspects that the label or the hat that you're stating you wear. There's so many more than that. And are they any, I think with that, I want to lead, are they from your leadership position, are they any trade-offs that you face when dealing with all these different hats? And I can't name them because I don't know all of them. Are they any specific trade-offs you have to deal with in this leadership position?
I Yeah, like it's you kind of touched on, I think I would say this is the most challenging part of my job. It's to balance between these different trade-offs. Talking about being in health tech, I think this might not be relevant to the fields that I was in before because you're the trade-offs are real here. Like you really
Yes.
kind of have to think carefully before making any decisions about, let's say, a roadmap. You have your own roadmap. That roadmap would it's not easy to improvise, and it's gonna be actually very costly if you're just being reactive without a proper plan because you're first balancing between, let's say, regulatory, clinical validity, um, like a product roadmap and features. So you're kind of trying to plan everything with the resources that are not infinite. And you are trying to make sure that it's commercially valuable, clinically valid. You have a pathway to how regulate these features and how to actually do clinical validations for them and develop them. And all of that needs to be poured into one roadmap. And it's not like I would say it's if you choose the wrong order as well, it's gonna be costly because it's gonna cost you lots of time, effort, and that definitely translate into money to develop one feature that has been not validated correctly from the beginning. So that's why I would say that's the most challenging part. You definitely needs to plan it ahead. Um, you need to have a strategy, you need to have a vision for what actually you are developing. Because on the other side, let's say you have a product that is clinically super functioning and everyone is happy with it. If you cannot actually build it in a way that it's scalable, you think of reimbursement, you think of like how you can also deploy it at scale, it's not just going to continue. That's as simple as that. So you need to think of that cycle as well. Um, so I'm giving just basically the tree that usually I have with every single decision. And that tree usually would take lots of thinking. All of these factors need to be poured into one roadmap. And that's why it's very, very important not to build in isolation. because you cannot oversee all of the factors by yourself. You need to speak with clinicians. You need to do initial validation. You need to do the commercial validation as well, and every single aspect of the idea to be able to reach that decision. So I would say like I'm planning much more than before, but it tends to be like really beneficial in the health tech space compared to when we started. We wanted to. Well, I think that's the trade-off that you say, like with the speed and the validation, but it's just a balance between them.
Interesting. I have yet to meet a true leader and a global expert that is not humble. And you definitely, when I met you in Dubai, um, I knew you were an expert based on the conversation, but the more I learned about you, it just confirmed that truly true leaders, they're the most humble people in the world, and simply because you know so much, and when you know so much you realize there's so much more to know. And you sharing all these different hats, all these different um, aspects that has to be taken in consideration in integrating AI into care, into patient care. There's so many, they're so interrelated, they're so trivial, and you even spoke about the order. um, Getting into the end of this conversation, though I don't want to end it, but I'm mindful of your time. Many of listeners of this podcast, HD's Chat Series, are medical doctors, healthcare professionals, but also includes master's students and medical students, especially for my class in AI and healthcare. What skills or mindsets that you already spoke about, but if you can summarize it, skills and mindset that are essential for building the future of healthcare and AI, and especially preventative health AI.
I see. So yeah, like as you mentioned, I would summarize the points that we already discussed because you asked, I think, the very relevant questions. Thanks to you, and I would say maybe iterating first on you stop building in isolation. Usually, we overestimate um, how the healthcare is so behind for a reason. Not because innovations are not there, but innovations are actually having a challenge, uh, adding value for a reason that needs to be figured out. So stop building in isolation, talk more to clinicians, to stakeholders, to whoever like you think you need to talk to be able to validate and to know how we can bring it from um, just a code and into a functioning solution that actually impact patients' life. Um, Second, I would say related to this, AI problems in healthcare usually it's more of system issues. So as I mentioned, when we were trying to help clinicians with TF scan, it's because of like huge number of population that is not screened because we simply don't have enough clinicians, and we don't have enough thermographers to be able to help that. So there is a gap here to be able to leverage thermography to solve a problem. So you need to think about the system behind the model, like the regulations, the economics, and also it, reimbursement down the way, like after everything. That's in itself a whole journey. You need to think about it as a system, not only as a model, and thinking only about accuracy and metrics. Um, it might sound counterintuitive as well. You need to also develop the skill of knowing when to not use AI, because that's actually how you can bring value. It's not always about AI. And finally, I would say like maybe this is we didn't discuss this in details, but you really need to invest in in data. Data so far has been one of the most valuable assets that I have been working with in the health tech, and we invested a lot in the data quality. It's really important, and it paid off. I think uh, we have been able to advance lots of the model just because we started standardizing data and make sure its quality it's up to standards since day zero, and we're continuing improving that. And I think that paid off. We're always thinking like if we have a data initiative and AI initiative, work with the data because you always can get to improve on that with the AI. Um, yeah, that's I think it's underrated on the age of LLMs these days because it looks like a boring job, but believe me, like it's a lot of work, but it pays off. It makes you ahead of anyone else.
Oh, absolutely. Any AI initiatives without data or quality data, it's doomed to fail. I use this in my own industry project as well, was teaching, and you can never emphasize when you're working on a project, I'm not going to put a number, but could be as much as 80% of your time is dedicated to getting the data, cleaning the data, making sure it's the right data in the right format, the quality. You're removing all the ones that are incomplete. And then the other 20%, again, not putting a number, is actually building and testing the model. When I try to speak about this, it seems trivial. It's only the data, let's clean it, and we're done. And
Right.
that data is all over the place, and rarely it all in one central repository in the first place, whether you're getting an API or just combining it together. So yeah, the fact that you mentioned it, I just reinforced to all my listeners, especially my students in early career, make sure you get the data, the right data, and the quality data. I have so many more questions. I think I'm gonna go back just quickly before we wrap it up. You spoke about the regulatory aspect, about the economics, and usually I don't really focus so much um, be, beside the investment into the economics, how you're dealing with insurances. That's a new aspect for me, making sure you're helping the patient, but the hospitals or the clinics are being reimbursed for this service that minimizing the cost, the long run costs to treat those patients. How, especially in your business, how you're dealing with those intricacies, though they're not AI related, but indirectly they are.
Yeah, so it's all connected as you mentioned. When you're thinking about it, you want to bring a solution that the patient can actually access so they don't have to pay for it if the insurance can cover it. And in the same time, that can be done at scale if it's proven actually it provides the value. How? Through health economic studies. So all of that, are you building AI that economically efficient to reduce the cost and the burden on the healthcare system? This is in itself is another question. This is all math, clinical trials, or at least data evidence based that you're bringing to show that actually you are helping improving the healthcare system by, let's say, bringing that screening program that will save people from amputation, but that needs to be evidence based. Evidence based, that evidence you're building it from your own model to the health economic studies itself. So it's very interconnected numbers that comes from like how you implement your model. Is it cost efficient? Is it going to scale well? And how much actually will cost the whole care system to bring this solution to be able to say that, oh, actually it brings value at the end. And it's a very interconnected study to be evidence-based in a health economic studies, but that in at the end will have very valuable impact by scaling that product with insurance across the regions. And that's why you need to think of like how this can be reimbursed, understand the coding schemes of the territories that you're working or targeting the product to be there after the regulation. So lots of people thinks that at regulation you you'll be able to bring the product at market, but actually the reimbursement is a big topic that you need to think ahead of it.
One more question, Mustafa. In your bio, you talked about sports medicine. And of course, you're working in that space and embedding AI into sports medicine solution. Is there any way you can share more insights about thermal imaging, how you leverage it in sports medicine, and how is that different from diabetic foot or using it in diabetic situations?
So for sports medicine, thermography, if we look at thermography, it's as I mentioned in the beginning, it's help us understand the human body through the thermal image or thermal signature of the body. So as like you're looking at all of these pathological changes that are happening in the feet, you could look also at these signatures in different parts of the body that originate from microvascular changes due to, let's say, in the context of sports, of muscle fatigue, inflammation, infection, any kind of injury. These injuries are very costly for athletes, like, and it's unfortunate, and there is big subjectivity in the pain assessment and the way that currently we're doing it on physiotherapy. So having a more objective way of like assessing and monitoring what could lead to a potential injury through these thermal signals would be very helpful for the sports team to be able to leverage, track over time, and even quantify like performance based on these signals over time. We're currently releasing our first sports medicine product by the end of this month, and it's going to be launched on Riyadh Marathon. Please visit our booth there if you happen to participate, and you're going to be able to do or try our smart mirror, which will do a full body scan for the participants, and hopefully we will be able to collect some feedback. But we're very excited for the product. It's fundamentally works with the same way that we're tracking these pathological changes validated for sports.
How do I'm not very familiar, so excuse my ignorance. I like the term smart mirror, where you proceed with a full body scan, but how the question escaped me, but how do you sports or athletes see the immediate value in embracing this scan? What is the impact and what is pretty much the value added to them or to the team?
I see. So imagine right now through all of these smartwatches and wellness devices, you're tracking your wellness signal with just looking at my sleep score, my rate variability, and all of these different metrics that would help you actually. Oh, I think I'm gonna take it easy this day, or actually it seems like my body recovered from something, or I'm in a potential of like falling sick because the signals are actually quite off. So think of it the same way. That's mirror. It's an extension of like your wellness. It give you a clear and indicating signal if like your muscles thermal signature is saying something, taking your profile into account, and it will basically participate as an extension of your wellness, but covers your entire thermal body signature at the same time.
So this is pretty much a personalized um, record of how you are doing um, through different times of your training or of your exercise as an athlete, which is extremely important if you should participate in the next game or just take it easy, right?
Right. You could prevent injuries with this. There is many applications in sports medicine through thermography to be able to detect injuries before they happen, and also be able to quantify the recovery over time to see like I'm actually recovering well, because you could be able to also track the signal over time of the injury to see like if it's going in the right direction or not.
So you're taking the same preventative aspect as you do with diabetes to same into sports medicine.
Exactly. The proactive approach is the fundamental on our solutions at Amplify.
Thank you, Mustafa, for an extremely rich, impactful, valuable conversation. Any last concluding remarks you want us to part with?
Thank you, Rashida, for all of this valuable information as well, like in exchange and bringing this series to life. I wish you all the luck as well with the continuous of this series because it's already kind of I'm seeing lots of experts talking about their own experiences that usually we don't find in blog posts because they are very busy with real life scenarios. And I think you're helping with spotting light on these cases.
I am so grateful for your kind notes. And on that, thank you for joining, and thank you everyone for listening and watching.
Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the organization or entity represented by the presenter.